work on. So I have just some like paper here, and then I actually have a little canvas too that I've already prepped, and I have my pencil drawing on here. So I was going to show you how to transfer this on if you have a printed picture. So if you have your printed picture, you can actually flip it to the back, or you can have a second piece of paper. It's up to you. You could do either one. You could use the back of your paper or a second piece of paper. I use a second piece of paper because I just kind of make, basically this is like a do-it-yourself piece of transfer paper, like carbon paper, and I just use a folded piece of printer paper. That way I can use this over and over and over again. You only have to make it one time, versus if you do it on the back of here, you might not, you know, it might be specific to this picture. So that's just kind of up to you. But basically what you're going to do is you're just going to shade the back with a pencil, and this is going to create a surface for you to be able to transfer with. So if you're able, do you have a pencil on hand?
Yeah. But I traced it on the
Oh, if you already have yours traced, then you're good.
That I was going to print.
Yep, you're well,
yeah.
You already have it traced. You don't need to do anything else then.
Okay.
This is just kind of catching anyone who needs to get theirs traced. So Marta, if you like want to even just take on the back of your black and white print, just kind of take a pencil and just color over the back of it. It can just be like all over the place. Does not need to look nice at all. And then what you're going to do is lay the graphite down, lay your picture down. And this, I'm going to actually put a little video. I actually recorded myself doing this one earlier, and I'm going to post it on our Element 3 homepage. So for when we do future classes like these, you can have it prepped ready to roll. And it's just an easy way to do it. I mean, we can freehand draw these, but I always say it's nice to just trace it when you're painting, especially because we're using a royalty-free image. This is from Unsplash.com. So if there's, you know, for me, the focus is on my painting, not the drawing. Drawing, I kind of view as a separate thing sometimes. So that's why I like to do this method. Now I happen to have like this little tool. I just picked it up at Michael's. It's pretty inexpensive. I think it was like a couple dollars. And I just use the tip of this to press into, just basically trace. And I just kind of trace the major lines and shapes. If you don't have something like this, you could just use your pencil again. You could use a like a ballpoint pen, anything you have. The goal here is just pressure. Tracing it with pressure will just put those lines on your paper for you. So it's just an easy way. Another way too, if you're just using papers, of course, go to a window and you can do a little tracing on your window. That works as well. So that's just kind of an easy way to get it prepped and ready to roll. So kind of set that to the side. So it doesn't sound like anyone needs to freehand draw it then. Cool. So I won't even worry about that then.
My print's really small, so I'll probably do it freehand.
Okay, you want to freehand it? Do you want me to walk you through freehanding it, or do you feel comfortable, or?
I could probably work on it here for a few minutes.
Okay, it's all right. Totally up to you, because I can walk you through it. I even did a little, I was gonna pull this out and show if anyone had to freehand it, just how even rough this freehand sketch is, where I almost just kind of did loose shapes in a square, because then you can paint in all the details too. So it's really kind of whatever your comfort level is. Sometimes beginner painters like to have more information and more lines there. And then sometimes they, you know, do fine with like a little loose shape.
I'll work on it for a few minutes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so what I'll kind of talk about as you're working on that is I just pulled out my color wheel here. Just talk about color a minute. Now, all you need for this particular painting, the only colors you'll need a red, a yellow, a blue, so your 3 primary colors, and then you'll need some white. We actually won't need any black for this painting because we're going to be darkening with complements today. Although if you do want to darken with black, you could. When I look at the picture in color, to me, nothing is dark enough that I feel like I need black on here. So that's kind of up to you. If you feel like you want to add black in, you could. I also have, my paint did come with a green. So if you do have you could use, or of course you could just use your blue and yellow and mix your own green. Either is fine. And I also have a few of these. I have some magenta as well. I have a light magenta and a dark magenta. These are not necessary, but sometimes magenta brings some of that color, the pop of color that we're seeing here. Again, you don't need magenta, but you could use it if you have some on hand. So taking a look at this color wheel, if I'm looking at red kind of as my main color, like as the tulips here, we're kind of going to be looking at like what's referred to as a split complementary color scheme. So if we kind of take a look at yellow-green, although we do have some greens here, there's a lot of kind of yellow-green in the stems. And then I am going to punch up the blue. I'm going to make this a little bit more kind of blue-green in my background, but more of a tint, so it'll be lighter. So that's what I'm choosing to do. You could keep it light like this. You could choose a different color. You could kind of do whatever you want. But I'm just, for me personally, I'm going to kind of focus on like a split complementary color scheme. So the first thing we are going to do after we have our image on canvas, on watercolor paper, whatever surface we're working on, we are going to apply a wash. So you can choose any color you want for your wash pretty much, except for you don't want to add any white into it. So what the wash does is it establishes a middle ground and value for us to build our painting onto. So looking at this, I would either decide, do you want a warm feeling or a cool feeling? Okay. So a warm feeling might be like a reddish wash, where a cool feeling could be like a greenish wash. And I'm playing with red and green simply because they're complementary here, okay? You could also put in a blue wash, a purple wash, a magenta wash, a yellow-green wash, kind of whatever wash color you're feeling. I am going to actually do a little bit of a magenta wash on mine. If you don't have magenta, but you want to do something warm, you could do like a red with a little bit of yellow into it. That would kind of punch it up a little bit, but go ahead and just pick a color for your wash. And again, this color could pop through if you want it to, but it does not need to pop through. You can totally cover it up completely, but with acrylic paint, it's designed to build up with layers. This is kind of that first layer. So I've just got my little colors here. I'm going to take like the biggest paintbrush I have. This is a flat, but you could use like an angled flat. You could use, this is a filbert, so you could do one of those. Whatever you have. And then what I'm going to do is just grab a little bit of this paint. I'm just going to kind of mix it on my bristles. And I'll just kind of show you. Okay, I've got about like this much paint in my bristles, and then I'm going to take my cup of clean water, dip my brush in that water, and I'm going to start to paint this on my canvas. Now I'm going to just keep adding water, not paint, and I'm going to go over everything. It's okay if it appears a little splotchy. It's okay if areas are darker than others.
Oh yeah, I guess.
Okay, but any color you want can work for this wash. You'll just put that over your entire surface. And again, you should be able to see your pencil lines through there. Sometimes when you're beginning to paint with washes, and if you draw lighter, you might learn to draw a little darker if you're losing some of your lines. But you can always draw back on top of this too. Another thing you can do is you can wash first and then sketch if you want to. I typically don't do that, but you could. I'm just keeping water and paint, just making sure it's kind of nice and even. Mine's kind of a medium kind of a wash. If it ended up lighter than this, that would be fine too. And then at this point as well, you can go ahead and paint your edges if you have a canvas. I usually like to see a little bit of wash on my edge as well with a canvas. If you're painting with paper, of course, you don't have to worry about that too much. And I paint on watercolor paper, I think, more than canvas, but I just happen to have this little square canvas that was the perfect size for this reference photo, so I decided to this instead. You'll notice that wash dries fairly fast. I mean, by the time you're done with the whole thing, where you started is usually starting to dry a little bit. And please, at any point, if there's any questions you have or anything, and stop and let me know. All right, so there is my wash. Usually I'll kind of blot up some of that water on my paper or on my.
I kind of wiped mine all out, so I gotta try to find the lines again.
Oh, did you lose it a little bit?
Yeah, I did.
So what you can do, and I can even kind of do this with you on mine a little bit, you can just kind of take your pencil and go back on top.
Okay.
Another thing, if you find you struggle with this, because I'll say I have had students that they just seem to wash away their sketches, it just happens. If you have some aerosol hairspray in a can, you can spray hairspray on this.
Before what?
Before you wash it. And what the hairspray will do is it'll set the graphite in and make it so it's not so smudgy. So sometimes that can be a really helpful thing to troubleshoot that a little bit. Yeah, I'll kind of sketch some of mine in too. And I think the more you start painting, the less you'll need to have so much details in your sketch because you'll end up painting those on anyway. So for me, it's really about the basic shape is what I like to see. And we're going to be kind of following a working from dark to light kind of process with this particular painting here. So yeah, I'll kind of sketch mine in a little bit more too. Give everyone a little time to make sure they're feeling good about it. And, you know, too, I'll kind of take the time to mention, and I've said this before in some other classes you may have heard me say this, but when I use a reference photo, it's simply a starting point. I did pick this one in particular because I wanted to work with this color scheme. But this could be a very realistic painting. It could be very whimsical and fun and expressive with lots of brush strokes. So keep in mind this process really applies to all styles of acrylic painting, as well as anything you might want to paint. So, you know, don't worry if yours doesn't look exactly like mine. You know, mine's definitely not going to look exactly like the photo because I like to make things my own. I think that's part of the fun, is getting to stray away from your reference. How's everyone feeling about their lines and what you have on there? Oh, good. Yeah, that looks good. So when we start with our colors, we're going to start up in here with the actual tulips. And when you're looking at the colors, and honestly, you can do this even with a black and white photo because you're still seeing tone. And honestly, sometimes that makes it easier when you just get to see those black and white tones. But basically, what we're going to look for is a dark red, a medium red, and a light red. We're going to break it down into 3 values to keep it simple. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mix our dark value red, and we're going to start popping those dark values in all over where we see them, okay? Then we're going to do the same thing with our medium values, then with our light values, and then we'll finish with our little teensy highlights, those really little bright spots that we see. And then we'll do the same kind of process with our stems and our leaves. We will break it down from our dark green to our medium greens to our light greens, and then finish with those little highlights, okay? So what I'm going to start with is take some of my red, and we're gonna mix our darker red value. Now, if you have some green, so you can see my red, it looks a little darker than it actually is on my screen, but this is kind of like a pure red. So I need to darken this just a little bit. So I'm going to do that with green. I'm going to darken with green. So that's by mixing in a complement. Now, if you have a physical green, you can use it. If you don't, just mix a little bit of your yellow with your blue. You don't need much. And I'm just gonna put just a little dollop of my green. Take a teensy dollop of that green and mix that in with that red. And you can just kind of keep adding the green in. And I am mixing with a brush right now, but you could mix with a palette knife too. I do have some sitting here. I just kind of started with my brush. And just, we're kind of going for, I mean, a fairly dark red in here. Some areas are a little bit darker, and we can kind of pop in those really dark areas later as well. We just kind of want a general kind of dark red. If you find that maybe your color just got a little too muddy or a little too brown looking, you can always bring some of your original red back into it. That's okay too. Okay. So I am going to work with a little flat brush right here. And I'm just gonna start kind of grabbing this dark red. I'll try to have my image in here too so you can kind of see this. think that can be helpful. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to be hopping around to kind of all these little areas where I see dark, and I'm just going to start putting in little strokes of dark. What we're doing here is called blocking in. So what we're not striving for is painting details. We're striving for painting the values in kind of the loose shapes that we see. Okay, this can be very expressive. Please don't feel like if your shape's not perfect to what you're seeing on your reference image that it's bad. Not at all. If you're not liking your color, like for me, I don't worry about my color being too perfect to this. I just kind of, you know, make it my color, and I just want it to be a dark value. But if color matching is something that you're striving for, you could even add a little bit of yellow or orange into this to kind of help with some of the brightness. Because when you do mix complements together, you lose intensity of color. And I'm just gonna kind of hop around all in here, kind of put these little values in wherever I'm seeing them. And this is a really, I think, fun way to paint too, because you start to see it build up over time. And it's okay to just hop back and forth between the different tulips here. Wherever you see those dark values, just kind of pop them in. And it's okay you don't have to stick with all the same exact dark value. You can vary it a little bit. That's totally fine to do. In fact, I think I am going to put just a little bit of yellow into some red here just to bring a little brightness into it. So keep in mind, you can hop around with those dark values. When I say dark, it's just kind of generally speaking, wherever you're looking and you're seeing darker areas, that's what you can focus on. But it's okay to play around with the brightness. It's not like you have to be stuck with one color and only that color. I'm even taking some of my existing red with this new kind of red orange I made. This is kind of nice. Brings back a little bit of that brightness I was looking for that I lost. Now it's a little tricky to see on my screen, but with my own eye, that's exactly what I was looking for. So I can kind of take some of that, kind of pop this in. So it's okay to play with your color here. Just because you've mixed a color and you start painting it doesn't mean you have to be committed to it. It's the beauty of acrylic paint is that it's very layerable, and you can let areas dry and layer on top of them. And that's why we also want to work dark to light, because it makes sense. Our lights will sit on top of our darks, and acrylic paint will naturally layer that way. I think too, you'll kind of get a better sense at how much information you like to have in a painting as you start to do kind of this process, because for some people, they like to see where lines and shapes of shadows are, where some people don't like that in there. They like to make that up themselves as they go. So it's just kind of a matter of preference. And feel free to change brushes, play around with different shapes. I'm still using a flat right now, but a round could be really nice. And I always tell my students, it's okay if you feel like a third grader's painting this right now. We're just focusing on shapes. That is it. We're detailing, we're refining, we're adding all that stuff later. That's coming later. We don't want to rush and add that stuff too soon, because we'll just end up painting over top of it. Details come at the very, very end. Just kind of try to hop around. And I think painting this way too, it helps things stay fresh. You don't have to sit there and render one full tulip before moving on to the next. And with acrylic, with how fast the paint dries too, this is a really nice process for that, because you don't have to mix the same color over and over and over again. At this point too, you can kind of play around with how you're laying your paint down and your brush strokes a little bit. And also don't worry about blending anything or making sure things look smooth at this stage. We'll worry about that later. In fact, a lot of times, especially with things like flowers, blending is often an illusion. It's not something we actually really do. It happens through layering and building up. And I do have a slightly lighter value. I'm still kind of playing with my darks here, but I am starting to add just a little bit of a lighter value now next to some of these darker values. So like I said, it is okay to hop around between a couple dark values at one time if you feel comfortable doing that. To me, it just feels very natural because I just kind of naturally start mixing the paint and naturally am getting these different tones that sort of work together. And if at any point you feel like, oh, I need to get my pencil in there again to draw out a shape or to see something a little bit better, you can absolutely do that too. How's everyone feeling so far? Feeling good?
Kind of a mess.
Kind of a mess? But that's okay. Kind of a mess is okay. That's not a bad thing. Just keep in mind that you can let areas dry and paint over top of them. And also, like I said, it is okay if it looks like, you know, a little kid did it at this point. And you can also, you know, if you feel comfortable, again, some of this is just level of comfort because I know some of you've been painting longer than others and, you know, we just have different levels of experience, but you can also kind of, like, for example, up here, I feel like the petal could come out more. So I could just do that with my paintbrush. So I could just kind of paint that shape and fill it in. So keep in mind, you can draw with your paintbrush a little bit too, and kind of add in shapes as you feel you need them. And the other thing I'll mention is just because we're starting with dark and then working toward light doesn't mean we can't come back to dark. You can absolutely go backwards if you need to and work kind of medium and then light and then kind of go backwards again if you need to. That is totally fine. But just focus on just seeing those different shapes in the different values. Sometimes if you're having trouble seeing it, I squint at it a little bit, and that kind of helps blur some of those dark values together and medium values together, and that just can help. I think I'm getting pretty close to needing my next value. So to me, this looks pretty good for my darks for now. Doesn't mean I'm not going to come back and add in, you know, some of these really kind of dark shadows with like a skinny brush later, but to me that's details. So I will do that toward the end. So I'm going to kind of mix up my next value, my kind of medium value. But to me, this is kind of where a lot of the brightness of the tulip comes into play. And I want to capture this brightness. Also, when we start to work with values, we learn that darks go back in space and lights come forward, which helps create depth. and the illusion of space on this flat surface. So by brightening this up a little bit, I'm thinking we need a little bit of yellow in with our red. Or if you have a tube of orange, I don't happen to have an actual orange on me right now, but you could do a little orange in there. You could do a little magenta in there. You could even put a little pop of white in there if you're wanting it to be a little bit more pastel-y. This is kind of up to you for this medium value, but to me, this is kind of where we want it to pop a little bit. But we want to kind of also, we want it to go along with these darks that we've just created. Now I will also mention, take a minute and mention this, is we did start with our flowers. Some artists like to put in backgrounds. I tend to like to paint a lot of my subject and then I start to put in a background. That's my process, thus I'm teaching you that way. It does not need to be that way. That's just kind of how I like to work. So I just want to mention that is when you're starting to paint on your own, if you feel more comfortable putting in a background first and then starting your subject, you can. But I just like there's something for me personally about putting in a background around a subject that I've started to form that brings it together for me, and I really enjoy that process. So that's why I do that. But again, you can choose for yourself. So I'm kind of mixing up this orange. I am going to put just a little itty bitty touch of white in this. You know, you can kind of play with this color here. Yeah, actually the white I think did exactly what I was wanting it to do. So if you've got a little white, so I've got red with a touch of yellow and some white. And I've got a little magenta on my palette that I'm just gonna, there's not much, it's kind of dry, but I'm just gonna mix that into here too. To me, that kind of gives me, again, I wish the color was truer on the screen as to what I'm seeing, but it's kind of, it's like this kind of muted red, but it was brightened with the yellow. It kind of is bringing out the kind of orangey quality here. To me, that looks really nice. But again, it's one of those things that if you start painting with it, you don't like it, you can always, you can alter those colors anytime. So I'm gonna grab a little bit of this and just kind of start popping in this medium value. Now, don't worry about leaving room for your highlights or anything because your highlights can go right on top of that medium value. That's no problem. I mean, you could leave space if you want, if you like that, but you can go ahead and just paint right on top. And again, at this point, it is okay if it still looks like a third grader did it. And usually after I get some of the blocking in done is when I will kind of start the background, which again, it starts to really define what you've painted and can be really fun. So then I'm just kind of going around and looking anywhere where I can kind of block in this medium value. Just kind of filling that in. And as always, it's okay to bring in a little bit of that original color, to darken it a little bit if you need to, add in a little bit more yellow for certain areas if you need to. It's okay to manipulate this color a little bit. And too, when we're working with something like a flower from nature, you know, they're not all identical anyway. So that can be kind of the fun part, is seeing some of the varieties of color. So like this, I could pop like a little bit more yellow in here. And some of that you can't really see on the screen yet, but as it starts to dry, some of this. I always say too, try to use like the biggest paintbrush you can for the area you're painting when it comes to acrylic. And a lot of those little tiny brushes we'll deal with at the very end. Let's see. A little bit more whiten. And if you find like you're having trouble differentiating some of your shapes, you can come back in with some darker colors. You can, because we'll start to do that a little bit more. One thing I want to point out is when you look really close at all these details, there's lots of little fine lines and little intricacies that we will put in here, but we just finish with those. And again, if you need to reshape something, I feel like I have to do that a lot when I'm painting. That's okay. The other thing too is you can turn your painting around and you could try painting it from a different direction if you want to. Sometimes that can be helpful just to change your your perspective, because sometimes when you're looking at something for extended periods of time, you don't see it clearly anymore. At least I know that's true for me. So sometimes it helps to spin it around, look at it upside down. And you could turn your reference photo around too. And so one thing I want to point out too right now, like I noticed I need a little bit more dark value up in here that I just didn't get the first time. So I'm actually just going to kind of pause my light value a minute and just pop that in now. So at any point in time, if you need to go back to a dark value to help with, the spot you're currently working in, that's okay too. You can hop back and forth if you need to. It's just kind of generally speaking, we work from dark to light. In here. So kind of as we finish some of these kind of loose values on here, we will just kind of block in some of the stems and leaves next, and then we'll do kind of a loose background is where we're headed. And then from there, we'll kind of start refining, blending, adding details, and kind of what I think is some of the most fun part of the painting. I love the end part of a painting the most, I think, because you get to see it start to come together, which is, I think, really exciting. And I do have pops like on mine where I'm letting the magenta show through because that's my style. I like to see brush strokes. I like to see things popping through. I like that expression. If you don't like that, if that's not your style, you can fill all this in. Another tip is if you take just a little bit of water on the tip of your brush, you can get a nice little clean edge. And that can kind of solve some of those little issues for you. Again, it's just little tips depending on your style, if you want to change some things up. So now I'm going to do a few loose highlights on these tulips. And then the other thing I'm also going to put in, if you notice on the bottom, there's a little bit of yellow. kind of on the bottom of these tulips. So I am going to block that in as well. So I'm going to do the highlights, the yellow, and then we'll go down to the stems and leaves, and then background. So for highlights, this time I'm going to start with my red, or my white. There we go. I'm going to go through every color first. So I'm starting with my white. Bring in a little bit of red. Don't need much red this time. A little bit more yellow. This. And I'm still not, nothing is like pure white. And I mean, when I look at my picture, I don't really see anything on here that's pure white anyway. I think all these little highlights are kind of a very, very faint, almost like a white with like a tint of pink in them, or like a light pink in them. So that's kind of the color I'm going for here. It's mainly white, but you've got kind of, I did a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red, just to maintain some of the brightness and to go along with this color, these colors I've already mixed, but then to kind of bring out those highlights. And at any point too, if you feel like your water has gotten super dirty, I actually have 2 cups sitting here just in case, but if you feel at any point your water is getting really muddy, go ahead and clean that out too, because that'll just make a world of difference in your paint colors being nice and clean and not muddy. All right, so now I'm just going to kind of look and pop in some of these little highlights. And I'm going a little bit brighter than I need to in some of these areas. But then what I can do is kind of bring some of that initial color back into here and kind of blend it. So you can kind of mix directly on your paper a little bit too, if you need to. So like I said, it's okay to go back and forth. It's okay to adjust your colors as you're painting. That's just something artists have to do. Just kind of, again, you could squint a little bit at your picture, your reference picture, just to kind of see those highlights. And again, this is, you can, depending on how close you want your painting to be to your reference versus, you know, if you want to stylize and change it up, which is, of course, what I tend to do. This is your time to do that. So if there's something you don't like exactly the way it looks, it makes a little bit more of this medium color here. This is your opportunity to change it. You can do anything you want. A little bit more through here. The other thing too is don't be afraid to kind of step back from your painting a little bit. You know, you're up close working at a table, and so sometimes it's a matter of you need to step back from it and see it kind of with some fresh eyes a little bit. So that can be really helpful as well, to see these values too. And then as you're kind of popping in these highlights, as you're going around, don't be afraid to, if there's a little adjustment that you need to make, like an area wasn't quite the right color, now's a great time to do that too. And so to me, this is kind of a loose block-in of my tulips. Again, you're going for like a third grader painted it. It's very loose, it's very blocky. That's the goal. So we're gonna go ahead and get out some green and start blocking in down here. And then we'll keep going from there. How you feeling about your tulips, everybody? Feeling good?
Well, if looking at this picture, I'd never paint again. Pretty bad.
But have you ever painted flowers before?
No.
Well, there you go.
I'm kind of a beginner.
Well, there you go. And so don't even worry about what it looks like. For you, Carol, this is more about experiencing the medium, mixing the paint, putting it on paper with the paintbrush. I would focus more on that today. And then I think what you're going to find is if you keep coming to these classes, over time, you're going to look back at this first painting you did compared to some, you know, stuff you did later on, and you're going to see your growth. So
I sure hope so.
You will. It's funny. I look back at some of my old sketchbooks and I just laugh at myself. You know, it's you grow so much, and sometimes you don't see the growth because it happens, and it's almost like you don't see it until you look back on something old you made. So trust me, you've got this.
Well, thank you for your encouragement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of those things they it's like, oh, go ahead.
I have to cut ties off my clothes.
So I've put out some green, yellow, and white. If you don't have any green, you can just mix your own with your blue and your yellow, and then have a little extra yellow. So you can get some of the yellow greens that we're seeing in the stems here. We're going to kind of do the same process where we're going to start with our darker greens. Now my green by itself is pretty dark on its own. I'm going to put a touch of yellow into it. And then I'm actually going to darken with a little red. Now, if your mixture ends up looking too brown, just put a little bit more green in it. That's how I'm getting my nice dark green for some of these little dark areas. I forgot about my yellow too, actually. So you know what I might do really quickly? I am going to grab some of my yellow and just kind of pop it in just a loose block in. We'll refine and detail this later. But I'm just gonna put in just a little bit of where that yellow is on the bottom of these tulips. Again, this is just kind of my first layer. My block in yellow tends to be, unless you mix it with white, it's a little transparent. That's okay for this because it's just my first layer. I'll be going over it anyway. Then I can just see where that yellow is. So, let's see. So I'm going to take my dark green. Now, and I feel like there's not a ton of areas that are super duper dark in here, but I'm just going to start filling in all those little dark areas. Let's see. And this is kind of one of those things you can put as much information as you want. You can really stay true to that reference image, or you can kind of change it up a little bit. I'm popping in a little bit of dark up by these stems. So anywhere where you're seeing dark, kind of that same process. And it's okay to hop around between several different darks. It's not like you only have to use one color only, but just kind of keep it all your dark values to start with. The more you paint this way too, the easier it gets, and you start to see things differently too. Is like I look at things and I'm like, oh, how would I paint that? How would I break that down? You know, what dark colors would I begin with? And that's just kind of like how my brain thinks now. And this process gets easier and easier the more you do it. So some of these classes that I'm doing will be these kind of longer paint with me sessions where we'll do these kind of paintings together like this to kind of practice our skills. And we can do all different types of subject matter. We can try animals, we can do landscapes, because I think each type of subject matter is going to teach you something different. And again, if you notice like your paint isn't, you know, as smooth as you want it to be, you can always put like a touch of water on your brush, especially in these little intricate areas. Sometimes that can be really helpful, make things look a little bit cleaner, especially if you're using a flat brush like I am. I like a little bit of water will allow me to use this edge and just kind of really get those shapes in there nicely. So pay attention to your brush you're using too. Is it working well for you? Is it not? Maybe you want to try a different brush, because that can definitely have an impact. So to me, that looks pretty good for most of like my dark values. So now I'll probably add like a little bit of white into this mixture. Just a little bit. I had too much at first. Want a little bit of white. Bring back a little bit of yellow into this. Kind of helps bring that green color back, because white tends to make things look very pastel-y, you might have noticed. So sometimes you might need to bring a little bit of yellow to kind of preserve that green color. So that helped me big time with my green here. So I added some white and then added some yellow. And then now what I'm going to do is go ahead and paint in all my medium values. Again, I'm not worrying about if it's blended or anything like that. I'm just kind of painting them where they go. A little bit more yellow. Like I said, you know, it's okay. You can manipulate your colors as you go. Now there's like a little kind of skinny line in this leaf, but I'm just going to put that in later. So I'm just going to paint completely over top of that. Good. So hopefully as you're starting to paint, you can kind of see what that wash is doing for you too. If you've ever tried to paint with acrylic and just gone directly on paper, you may notice you need more layers to build up the paint's opacity. But that wash helps you by establishing the ground for you already to work on. And then that way you're not working on white, you're working on a tone. And that actually can make things a lot easier. Plus, I think at the end, it makes your painting look more finished. And I think it adds to the depth of your values when you have a wash underneath. And again, I'm just, you know, I'm having fun playing with my colors a little bit. I like to venture away from my reference photo and make it my own. I think that's the really fun part. But you know, that that comes when you start feeling comfortable too. So if you don't feel like you're there, or you want to keep yours as close to the picture as possible, that's okay too. Whatever you feel good about, that's what's important here. I'm almost kind of outlining a little bit of these stems, and then on the inside will be some of the lighter value, but that's just kind of going to punch them up a little bit for me. Sometimes it's fun to see different strokes of all these different colors underneath. That's the beauty of acrylic, is we can layer it up and build it up that way. So, you decide, do you like seeing brush strokes? Do you like things smooth and blended? This is partially about you figuring out what you like, kind of the aesthetic look of, versus what, isn't your favorite look. I'm going to go ahead and lighten to do kind of a lighter value through my stems here. I actually just noticed I missed this leaf too, so I'll come back and get that guy. And two, if anyone has any questions, if you're like, oh my goodness, I need to troubleshoot this, or you need a solution for something, don't be afraid to throw that out there. I just feel like, I say this a lot too, that painting is a lot like building with Legos or building blocks, because you have to start somewhere, and sometimes that place you start, it doesn't look like anything at all. And then as you start to build and add details and more components and more colors, it starts to transform. So I just say, be careful about critiquing yourself early on or during the process when you're learning, because I think sometimes that holds you back a little bit. So I'm definitely adding in a little bit of yellow to this light value I'm making, just to kind of preserve that green color. Actually, I almost feel like I need more yellow. That. And if anyone's having trouble like mixing a certain color, like how do I get it to be more vibrant, or how do I get it to be more true to what I'm seeing, just let me know too, so I can help with that. But I'd say in the beginning, especially during the block-in, the specific color is less important than the value that you're seeing. And when you're painting your light values, paint right on top of some of those dark ones. That's okay. That's when we're starting to see that layering start to happen and that buildup. And two, at any point, if you feel like you need to pop in a few more dark values so you can, understand your lines better or see shapes better, feel free. But again, this block-in, we're striving to get the values we see down on our paper or our canvas, and then we get to adjust later once we've got all that information there. And, you can play around with your brush strokes a little bit. You could do kind of short, quick brush strokes for certain areas, which would be kind of like a little hatching technique. That can be kind of nice, especially on some of these leaves. I'm almost just kind of like lightly tapping my brush, or just kind of almost scraping it up and down, side to side. So you can play around with those brush strokes. And if that feels something like, ooh, that doesn't feel comfortable to me, take a time where you can just go on some paper in your sketchbook and just try different brush strokes. Because I find that when you do that, you get comfortable with what the brush can do. We can hop back in. I can pop in a little bit more dark in here if I need to. If you need a little bit of that smoother edge, don't forget a little water on your brush can help. And then some of this like loose background area too, if you've got just some empty space, you can almost just kind of fill that in with some different greens if you wanted to. You know, too, I always keep in mind, we're doing a painting and we want it to look like a painting, whereas this is a photograph too. So the texture and the surface quality is going to be very different, but we want that.
Wait a minute, Michelle. Oh wait, let me mute it. Excuse me, everyone.
Oh yeah, no worries. Feel like a little bit more yellow might be kind of nice in here. Warm it a little bit. I like to play up the brights a little bit. I think that's kind of fun too. Sometimes when I block in, I like to go brighter than normal too. And then when I detail, I kind of blend in some of the more realistic colors on top. That can be a fun way to kind of punch up color, play with your paint a little bit too. So I feel like my leaves and petals are pretty well blocked in. Again, they're not detailed, they're not refined, nothing like that yet. But what I do want to start doing is blocking my loose background. Then after I get my background done, then I'm ready to kind of refine, play around, do all my little detailing. And keep in mind, you know, I think kind of the era of like the sip and paint style parties have taught us that paintings can be often accomplished in a short period of time. But keep in mind, you know, I did a lot for an hour and a half for a painting today. But even then, if you feel like it's not finished when we're done together, it doesn't need to be finished. You can keep working on it and developing it. And, you know, you can always email me a picture and I can give you feedback or, you know, advice. So keep in mind that paintings take time and they don't always have to be completed in one sitting, especially in acrylic. You know, you can get up and you can come back to it the next day. You know, I think that's just important to mention is they don't always have to be done right away. So for my background, I want to do kind of like a lightish kind of muted blue color is kind of what I'm feeling. You could do any color you want. I'm going to start with some white. I'm going to put just a little bit of my blue in it. And then I'll actually probably bring in some of this bright green into it too that I've already have sitting here. So I'm going to start with mixing this up. And because this is your background, feel free to mix plenty of paint. You know, sometimes that can be frustrating if you've got a large area that you run out of paint on and have to try to mix as close as you can. But fortunately, when we're blocking in a background, I mean, sometimes my block in backgrounds, I keep them because I like how soft they are, but sometimes I do something else on top. So it's really up to you. And then I'm just gonna scrape in some of this kind of light green that I had sitting here. I think it'll, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of this muted kind of blue, but it's got that little hint of green in it that's going to complement nicely here. But then I think play on nice with my magenta wash too. So for your background, I mean, you can use as big of a brush as you feel comfortable with. Sometimes I'll use a couple, like some bigger ones on these open areas, and then hop in with some smaller ones. This is an opportunity for you to refine your shapes of your tulips. If there's something you don't like about them, you can kind of use this background color to do that. Now, you can leave parts of your wash showing. You can get rid of it. This is up to you. See, sometimes I think leaving like a little bit of a soft edge with a wash can be kind of pretty. It just depends on what you like the look of. You could also just cover it up completely and have a really beautiful solid background. And if you're like, Jen, why do you paint your backgrounds this way? I like to do this first. That's okay. You can do that. Like I said, this is just something I like to do with my particular process that just feels good to me. So this is what I do. And I think art, that's really important to note. Just because there's a procedure or a process doesn't mean you have to do it that way. You can be creative and go, you know, the way you like to go too. This is a good time too, if you can also paint your edges if you're using a canvas. You can kind of match it. So I usually just kind of block in as much of that large area as I can with my bigger paintbrush. Sometimes these angled ones are nice because you can use like the angled edge, even though it's bigger, to sort of get into smaller areas. All right, so now I'm ready for this guy. And so sometimes with these smaller brushes, this is an opportunity for you to, like I said, manipulate the shape of your flower a little bit. If something, maybe it got too big or it, you know, kind of went out into your background, you could clean it up now. And so maybe that's why another reason I like doing my background after the fact is I can use it to sort of shape my main subject. I just also love the process of seeing it come together, because I feel like as you start to paint in a background around your subject, it just starts to transform it a little bit. And you can play around with different brush strokes here. You could kind of layer them and do like almost like impasto style brush strokes where your paint's a little bit thicker if you like the look of that, or you can have it be nice and smooth. Acrylic really caters to kind of many different styles. I'm liking this color with the magenta. I think it looks nice seeing kind of the pops underneath. So sometimes like I'll layer my background so I'm not seeing any of my wash, but this is an instance where I just think it's adding to my painting and it enhances it. So it's something that I probably want to see. Manipulate this a little bit, bring that in. So yeah, it's just almost like another way to draw into your painting a little bit. then as you're, you know, kind of watching how your color changes and manipulates over the wash, you know, next time you try a painting like this, if you did a cool wash, try a warm wash or vice versa. So you'll start to probably have favorite wash colors over time based on just what you like the look of. Getting there. I did pretty good with my, usually I'm one, I feel like I never mix quite enough paint. I don't know why. I just always do this to myself, and this time I like mixed just the perfect amount. And it's okay if you need to get like a little skinny brush out if you don't feel as confident with some of the bigger brushes with kind of cutting in. Sometimes that takes time. So there's my background. You know, you can kind of see my wash through it. Again, I kind of like how that looks. That looks nice to me. So I'm going to keep that. And then I am going to take my bigger brush again, and because I'm using a canvas, I don't know if anyone else is, but because I am going to do just a really quick little kind of loose, again, still seeing my wash a little bit to get those edges. One thing you can do if you find your paint is running low, the color you need, if you put just a touch of water on your brush, you can usually make it last a little bit longer. On one more side. Again, I like seeing the wash kind of on some of my edges too. I think that can just be kind of pretty, but it's a matter of opinion and preference. So how's everyone feeling so far?
No comment.
Oh, great.
Oh, it's looking pretty. Yeah, that Marta, that looks wonderful. Oh, nice, Lori. Oh, yeah. I can't, Lori, I think you're on mute.
Hi, Jen. I came in halfway, so I don't know.
No, that looks awesome. Look at, you're getting the shape. Yeah. Here's one thing I want you all to keep in mind too, as beginners, is sometimes it's little victories, like the shape of something is really nice, or you mixed really good colors, or your paint application was great. So I would say it's easy to feel, I think, overwhelmed sometimes because, you know, you see a finished product someone did, or someone who's experienced it, they make it look simple. But just keep in mind, like, little victories are good. Little things that you're liking. And the next time you do this, you're going to be even better at it too. So, and then Lori, I'll tell you this as well, but I made a little video on how to transfer an image to your canvas. So I'll be putting that on the club homepage. So that for future classes like these, you could have it ready to roll if you wanted to. Well,
I came in, oh, sorry.
No, you're okay.
I came in late. Where did you get the image from anyway?
So this image, all of my references I use come from unsplash.com.
Okay.
unsplash.com. It's all royalty free. So, and then this particular image, whenever I do an image for class, I will link it on our blog ahead of time. So for next week's, we're doing a watercolor sunset. I will link the image so you can print it ahead of time if you want to, or have it ready. So you'll always know what we're going to paint ahead of time.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. So we've got a little bit of time left. I know it goes so fast when we're painting. It just goes so fast. But kind of the last step here. Now there's certain things I could do. Like I said, I could refine this background more if I wanted to. I could paint something else back here, but I like how it looks. I like seeing my wash through it. I like kind of the looseness. So for me, I think I'm ready to start detailing and refining. So that's when I pull out all of my little guys. So
What numbers are they?
this is a, let's see, they're all different. This is a 0. This is a 2.
Okay.
This one's probably, I guess, like a 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then this company does them a little different. The Royal Majestic, they do like, theirs don't even make much sense to me. This is like 20/0, and then this one's like 5/0. So I need to download their size chart. But yeah, it's just kind of any smaller brushes you have is usually what I'll use. But you know, it's not to say you wouldn't want to pull out like something like this too. Could be really nice for some of these other details. But this is when I kind of look at my image here and I think about like texture or surface quality. So if you look at like this petal right here on mine, it's kind of just this loose shape, right? But if I look closely here, I can see a little bit more kind of blending. I can see kind of like a little highlight over here. So then what I can do is get a little bit more up close to this. And let me just grab some paint real quick. A lot of my reds have dried. This is also when this comes in handy. I think, Lori, you said you bought some of this, the slow dry blending medium. So this, if you mix this with your acrylic paint, it'll keep it wet longer and it'll make it really blendable. So this is a kind of a beginner's, well, it's anyone's best friend. It is a professional medium, but one little jar of this will last you for quite a while. I got this from Michael's, and you just mix it in with your paint just on your palette, just mix it all in. It'll keep it wet longer for you. And it makes blending, learning how to blend a lot easier because you have time with it. And I think the hardest thing for beginners is they don't work quickly because they're new and then the acrylic paint dries on them. So this is a nice thing, especially when you're detailing and blending. All right, I'm going to use a little space over here. And we'll do a little bit of yellow. We'll just kind of maybe pick one of these and just kind of pop in a little bit of detailing and kind of refining. We're definitely not going to finish the whole thing, but that's okay. I think we got a lot in today. Mix my color up a minute. So like I could focus on this one a little bit and, you know, maybe so if I'm focusing kind of on this petal, I might start by just kind of fixing the shape a little bit. So sometimes when you're detailing, you're also refining a little bit, and that's okay. I just need to fix the shape of this a little bit. And then I can start adding in I can start putting in like some of these like little shadows that are closer to here. That color. My water is getting a little dirty on me, so some of my colors are just looking a little muddy. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Need some more red in that mixture. I was looking a little. Okay, so now I've got this kind of darker red. I can kind of pop this back in here. And to be honest, I know I said I wasn't going to use any black, but I've changed my mind, which is okay to do. I am going to put just a teensy little bit of black in this because of this little edge right here, just to kind of show you what I would do here. So I'd mix like a little red in with some black, so it's not pure black. And then like along this little edge, you could kind of detail. And this will help with that contrast. And I'll just get like a nice little skinny line. To me, this is where the painting kind of starts to come together. Doesn't look like blobs of color anymore when you're done with this part. It looks, things kind of start to get defined. And I like using tiny brushes and I like detailing. So for me, I like this part of the painting a lot, but it can be time consuming. But I'm gonna take my like little skinny brush, and you can even draw with it a little bit if you need to bring some shapes back into it. Your painting goes a lot faster if you wait till the very end to do all this stuff rather than rushing to do it when you're painting in the beginning.
Yeah, I don't like that. Too brown.
And yeah, sometimes mixing those complements together, because complements in equal proportions will make brown. So sometimes it's getting that balance right. And the other thing could be trying different reds and different greens and different combinations with each other too.
Mm-hmm.
Some colors just mix better together than others do. They just, yeah, I'm actually liking a little bit of black and red in this. Because to me, I can kind of start to make things pop a little bit. I'm seeing a little bit more of that contrast. It's just nice to have it be softened with some red so it's not so harsh. Even bringing some into here.
I've done enough.
You've done enough?
Yeah, I'm just messing it up now.
And here's the other thing I'll say. And I'll kind of zoom out a little bit so you can see some of that detail a little bit further away. Because then you can start to see how darks go back and lights come forward. Now, to be honest with you, I could probably spend a few more hours on this before I was done with it, with my head down, working on it, detailing it. That's just how I am. I'm not a fast, super fast painter in that sense. I block in pretty fast, but after my block in, that's when I'm really working it. So the other thing I'll say, if you feel like you've overworked something, stop. That's okay to stop. It's also okay to stop if you feel frustrated and put it away for the day and come back out and get it out in a couple days and look at it with fresh eyes.